Hello and welcome to the third part of the coming cosmic shift. I covered in the first episode around our connection to the environment and just how important that is. We are the environment, in fact. There is no separation. The very thing that keeps us locked in to the illusion of our separation is a thing called the magnetic monopole. It sits just under the sternum here, according to human design, according to Ra Uru, who was given this knowledge. And this magnetic monopole keeps two aspects of our consciousness intact. You see, there are two crystals of consciousness that are in our multidimensional anatomy. We have what's called in human design, the head center sits up the top here, and within the head center sits the personality crystal and the ajna, which sits in the, as we know, the ajna is called the third eye in the seven chakra Hindu Brahmin system. Now, in that center sits the design crystal. Notice there are two different crystals. Henceforth, we are a binary consciousness. Binary being two in this one function. This binary consciousness that is not just physical and not just mental or spiritual for that matter. What are these crystals of consciousness? Well, according to the mythology of human design, these crystals were always there. They were there in the beginning. Now, when we think crystals, I want you to understand that these are not crystals as we understand crystals. Don't go thinking shiny rocks, okay? The the crystals of consciousness are in fact dark matter and dark energy. The dark matter being the design principle, and the dark energy being the personality principle, the yin and the yang. You see, these aspects of our being were first non-physical. We don't understand dark matter. We don't understand dark energy fully. We would like to think that we do, and science has come a long way, but there's still so much to learn. Everything that is physical comes from that which is first non-physical. We must understand that dark energy and dark matter is not physical as far as we understand it. Now, there has been a process that has taken place when these crystals of consciousness, the dark matter, the more solidified form of dark energy, which is the more energetic side of the solidified form, this dimension of what we call dark, energy and dark matter, they collided. There's these crystals, the crystals of consciousness, the personality crystal of the dark energy, and the design crystal of the dark matter colliding together and shattering into fractals, trillions upon trillions upon trillions of fractals. And so what has happened over many, many millennia, many millions of years has been an evolutionary process. One that is the evolutionary process of the cosmos that has come out of something that we can't even begin to fathom. We can't. And so we almost need to just let go of even trying to work it out sometimes. We need to go with what is, innately evident to us. You must find these things out for yourself. What is your experience within this? So going back to this binary consciousness, we are not what we thought we are. We are not what we think we are. You see, under the seven-centered being, the seven-centered propaganda that we're still living under, that's the part that I want to address today in this coming cosmic shift, is that there's a shift that took place that the memo didn't go out. The memo really didn't go out. Back in 1781, we went through a shift within our multidimensional anatomy that took us from the seven-centered being to the nine-centered being. The seven-centered being is strategic in nature. Strategic. They lived for only, no more than 30 years because they were Saturnian beings. The seven-centered being was a Saturnian being. They were governed by the planet of Saturn. And Saturn's cycle is that of around 30 years, 28 years. And so that was the cycle of the seven-centered being. And it was like that for many thousands of years. It's only been in the last sort of 250 years since we have been nine-centered beings, which is not a long time in the grand scheme of things, that we've been nine-centered. We've only been nine-centered for a very short amount of time. So as you can begin to understand, we're still only beginning to come out of the understanding of what it meant to be a seven-centered being. But we're no longer that. We're no longer that. With nine centers, we are far more multidimensional than our predecessors. The seven-center being worked under hierarchies and were deeply strategic. They had to be strategic in order to survive. You see, the seven-centered being was all about survival. They were also all about the tribe and reaching out for an authority that was outside of them. That's where we had the structures of kings and queens and rulership. There was always a chief of the tribe. There was someone that was a head of the group. This is the hierarchy of the seven-centered being. Now, in order for us to understand the coming cosmic shift that takes place in 2027, we've got to understand that we kind of, as I said before, we missed the memo that we have changed. There was an evolutionary shift that took place in us that we're only a handful of people are really becoming aware of now. When you've had your human design reading done, especially if it's done by someone that knows what they're doing and can get the transmission across to you in an effective manner, you begin to understand that human design, the design of forms as it was given to Ra Uruhu, is very, very precise in its application, its measurement, and what it can show you about yourself. Now, you see, any truth that you want to reach in your life needs to be reached within yourself, especially as a nine-centered being. For the seven-centered being, the truth was out there. The truth was in the gods. The truth would be given to you via the rulers and leaders of the time. But the truth is not found that way anymore. The chance to awaken is also beginning to shift and change. Feel the energy at the moment. How many people, especially since COVID and all of that sort of thing, how many people have woken up all of a sudden? This awakening that took place out of a catastrophe, you could say, or a crisis. You see, change happens through two means, one of two means, either by choice or by crisis. Now, if you choose to make a change, if you choose to shift, well, then, you know, that has been initiated by yourself. But if you wait and wait and wait, then it could be crisis that causes that change to take place. If we do not delve into our inner knowing, if we do not trust our own inner authority, we will never know what it means to be a nine-centered being. And the full evolution of this nine-centered being, well, not the full evolution, but a grand part of the finalization of a shift that took place back in 1781 reaches its conclusion or its fullness, I should say, in 2027, February 18 to be exact. Now, what is going to take place here is the fullness of the nine-centered being coming into its greater purpose, coming into its greater expression of why it is nine-centered. You see, the nine-centered being is here to have its own authority. The nine-centered being is here to have its own strategy according to its own type, according to its aura. You see, we as humans are uniquely unique. The seven-centered being was not so unique. It was more like a, cookie cutter kind of situation. The seven-centered being was always trying to open the third eye, through meditation, trying to seek God. It was all about the tribe and the community trying to build together. It was always about having someone outside you being the leader and you giving your authority to them. After 1781, the main shift that took place there through a inner evolution that happened in our energy centers. It was the shift in the energy centers. Instead of being a hierarchy of one center on top of the other, we now had, if you get a chance to look at the body graph in human design, you begin to see how the centers are more spread out. And also, there is a network of circuitry. And there are three different types of circuitries. There's an individual circuitry, tribal circuitry, and collective circuitry. And so, even within that, each human being has nuances that are unique to them. As we go through our evolution, as we approach 2027, those that are awake, those that are aware, can really feel the shift that is taking place. And there are big shifts taking place that we will continue to feel the energy of. Notice that more and more people are beginning to turn their back on the authorities outside of them. More and more people will walk away from those authority structures. More and more people looking into their own personal authority, trusting their strategy. That's what human design is all about. It's all about strategy and authority, your strategy and authority. Knowing the other is important. But knowing the other is important to projectors. Knowing thyself is important, but knowing thyself is important to generators. For the manifestor, it's about knowing their impact. For the reflector, it's about knowing the collective. You see, it's not the same for everyone. The coming cosmic shift is all about you following your strategy and authority and not placing all of the onus on that outside of you. The truth is not out there. The truth is not out there, as Mulder and Scully would say in the X-Files, sorry. As long as we are looking as nine-centered beings outside of ourselves for authority, you won't find it. You won't find it. You're literally turning yourself into an NPC, a non-player character by doing that. By doing that which goes against your nature. We are not seven-centered beings anymore. And the shift that takes place in 2027, the shifting of the histidine codon, which will shut down the gate 49, which is the gate of revolution, and reaching over to the gate 19, which is all about needs. It's all about needs. You see, we all as human beings have needs. And in the root center is that gate 19, which is all about the needs. We need food, we need shelter, we need love, we need all of those things. But reaching over through the channel to the solar plexus, sitting there is the gate 49, and that is the gate of revolution. It is the gate of the bargain. It is the gate of, I have needs, and over here we have, you have needs, and the gate 49 is, well, I can give you what you want. I have what you want, but we need to arrive at some kind of bargain here. It is also looking at this coming together. It is the gate of marriage. It is the gate of bonding. It is the gate of making that bargain, making that contract. Now that channel in 2027, well, that is split. And beings born after 2027 will not have access to that channel anymore. It will be the gates, but no longer having the channel. Imagine having such a shift and such a lack of awareness of a shift. We said we didn't know. I didn't know that I was a nine-centered being. I didn't know that. How was I to know that I was a nine-centered being when all of the world is saying, if you're in the spiritual circles, all the world is saying you're a seven-centered being. 7 personal chakras, right? And we don't function under those chakras anymore. We have energy centers that are connected through circuitry. We have had an upgrade that we were very unaware of. And this information, this understanding of the upgrade, that this evolutionary process that we went through didn't come through until 1987 in order for us to begin to understand this. Even then, I'm still surprised at how many people don't know about human design. There are many phenomena in which we are not really aware of. We've always wanted to give our authority to something outside of ourselves, and there is an authority outside of us that we are very unaware of, that the beings, particular beings born after 2027, will have conscious access to. But the raves that are coming, this new being that will be born out of Homo sapien and transitus, the rave, they're not like us. They're nothing like us. They're so different from us. Because you see, the raves are really part of a process, an evolutionary process of an auric form that we have been so unaware of. Maybe some have been aware of, but if you think about whenever you're in a group of, say, 3 to 5 people, notice that the dynamic of who you are, within that group, shifts and changes. Who you are as an individual is completely different as to who you are in the group. Why is that? Well, there is a trans-auric form, according to the knowledge that was given to Ra Uru Hu, this trans-auric form called the Penta. The Penta. We are born into pentas. If you look at it, it comes from the root 5. A penta ultimately likes to function in groups of 5. So what happens when we have 3 to 5 people come together? A trans-auric form comes into form. It forms in that place. This trans-auric form doesn't have a physical body, but it does have an aura. It has an aura. The Penta. This trans-auric form that we do not have conscious access to controls us in our family environment. Some of you would know, if you're an adult, as when you're in your family, outside of your family, in different environments, in different places, in your own field especially, you know yourself completely differently than when you go back to your family. You're seen as that black sheep. You're seen as that one that's a little bit different, often feeling like you're on the outskirts of the group. The Penta is very, very interesting. What the Penta does is it utilizes the circuitry within our power column in the human body graph. It goes from the lower gates of the throat down to the upper gates of the root center, also of the sacral center. And so the sacral has 3 gates at the top, the access to 3 gates at the bottom of the G center, traveling through to 3 gates above the G center that move through to 3 gates underneath the throat. So it is the G center, the sacral, and the throat centers that are involved in the Penta. The Penta uses the circuitry. So depending on what gates and channels you have within your body graph, depends on whether you're a Penta type or a non-Penta type. I have 8 activations out of 12 in that vertical power column. So the Penta uses a lot of my circuitry. As far as the Penta goes, when I'm in a group of 3 to 5, well, I'm going to find myself quite active and quite utilized by the Penta because it uses the circuitry that I have. Other people may have 1 or even no activations in their power column and therefore are not Penta beings. And that is why some beings can get lost in the group. They get lost in the group. I don't get lost in the group. I don't. But I need to be very careful as a projector. I can be, very overwhelmed over time because my circuitry is being used by a trans-auric entity. This trans-auric entity we have no conscious access to, but it controls the group and it controls your family. Your groups at work, you are under the control of the Penta. I mean, think about that for a moment. An entity that has no body controlling the group. And then we have another entity when you get a group uh, of pentas, and I'm pretty sure I can't remember now. It's around 5 pentas plus an alpha. Then you have what's called a wa, and the world is run by was. We could call them corporations. It's interesting that we have the word corporation. It means dead entity, meaning that it's an entity that doesn't. The word corpse means dead. Now, this penta and the wa, they don't have physical bodies. They simply use the energetic circuitry within us. When we enter into groups between 3 and 5, the penta forms between that group, and then it's in control of that group, and we are completely unaware of it. So what does this have to do with the 2027 shift? Well, the beings that are going to be born after 2027, the Rave, they will not have so much access to their own individual circuitry. In fact, they will appear to be deeply, deeply autistic. These children will be born and will be seen and projected upon as being very troubled beings indeed. But when these beings come together, and it doesn't matter what age they are, when these beings get a chance to come together into the Penta is formed, and they literally give their entire identity to the Penta. So what's the difference? They will have conscious access to the Penta. This trans-auric form will be controlling the group, and they will have conscious access to that controlling mechanism. They will know themselves, not really know themselves individually, but they will know the Penta through their collective circuitry. These groups of 3 to 5, and ultimately the Penta will strive for 5, because that is the Penta in its fullness. Even though the Penta does very odd things, like when you have a group of 5, it's always pushing one out. But then if something happens to one of them, there's always 4 to come back to. There's so many dynamics to look at. But the reason I bring this up is the shift that is coming is beyond us as individuals. It really is. We're coming into a new stage, a new age, a new aspect of our evolution. Though the raves are not us, they come from us. They will be powerful beings, but not like we are. We will cohabitate with the raves. Homo sapien will not disappear completely, but the raves, well, the background frequency is here to support raves. It is here to support the evolution and the growth of raves. As time goes on, the background frequency will just not be there to support Homo sapien and transitus. It's going to be different for us, and especially in the way that we lived our life. We have come from a very long line of strategy, of making it happen, of authoritative structures, of seeking God, of seeking higher powers, of seeking that which we are not. But we, under this structure that we're in now, this intransitus, we are a being that is in this transformational state. We are becoming something new. Not like the seven-centered being, which was seven-centered for so many years, all the way back to the Neanderthal, which was 5-centered and very receptive, not strategic. The Neanderthal was very right in its orientation, meaning that it was very receptive of the environment. And then there was the shift and change when we morphed into the 7-centered being. We went from being right and receptive to left and very strategic. It was all about survival. It was all about growth. It was all about attainment, attaining enlightenment, attaining land, attaining wealth, attaining large families, all of that. It was all about attaining, acquiring, getting, having, building, all of that that we have known for human beings to have been for such a long time. And all of that is going away. We can feel the shift, the change, and that people are really, truly now, you know, the point of this video is to remind you now that what this is about, the shift and change that is coming. There is a coming cosmic shift that in 2027, the background frequency changes, and therefore the sea of energy that we swim in will be different. And unless we change how our minds work, we're going to be functioning in a background frequency that does not support the way that we used to function. It doesn't support that old school way of strategizing, of activity in acquiring and building and having authority outside of you and bowing down to a god and all of that. That there is not going to work for anyone anymore. It's going away, and we can see that. We can see that. We can feel it. You know, there's a real drop in fertility taking place. That's going to happen as we continue to approach 2027, and it's going to keep becoming an issue for human beings. The background frequency is not going to support the continued growth of Homo sapien and transitus. It's not. You know, we're slowly going away. The raves will slowly and over time, and it's going to take a long time, but the raves, the background frequency supports them. It's a deeply individuated frequency, that the cross of the sleeping phoenix. It's not like the cross of planning. In fact, it's almost the exact opposite. It's not about striking bargains. It's not about trying to get on top. It's not trying to achieve this and achieve that. Now, I don't want you to be get the wrong idea here, because you see, for the raves, they won't function as individuals. They won't be able to function as individuals. They will only be able to function. They will only be strong. They will only be in their fullness in the Penta, in this trans-auric form. They can only function at their highest potential in the Penta. Now think about us. We can't escape the Penta, but we will never have conscious access to the Penta. We don't. I mean, think about it. You know, in certain groups, it's all about the circuitry, right? In certain groups, the circuitry is different. So you can be around certain people, and that group is fine for you, because the dynamics of that Penta are very different. Every Penta almost has its own personality, but they don't have a body. And then you go into your family and you're the black sheep again. But when you're at work, you're the one that's at the top and recognized a lot more. It's all dependent on who makes up that pentic form. The circuitry is literally loaned from your system by the Penta. The Penta only has its form by 3 to 5 people coming into a group. It's just the most bizarre thing to think about, right? But I want you to test this out for yourself. Notice how differently you act in the group. Notice how often, you know, even on your own, you can feel just so more at peace with things and be able to get things done really well. And then in the group, you get lost. So what happens there? You know, you could be really good at leading when it comes one-to-one, because that's different. When you're dealing with one person, another person, that's called a connection. But as soon as you go 3, now the Penta has formed, and the Penta controls the group. I mean, just think about that for a moment. Something that we don't see is in control. You know, you can understand why for so many thousands of years we were seeking for God, looking for God, finding that which is outside of us, which is a greater power. Well, it has been there, really. The forming of the Penta, you see that the coming cosmic shift is not about the individual. It's not. It's about the Penta. It's about the evolution of the Penta. Now, what do we do as human beings when it comes to this? Well, there's only one thing you need to do. Follow your strategy and authority. You see, your strategy and authority is yours, and it works according to your aura, to your type, to who you are. It doesn't work according to who anyone else is. The only way you can protect yourself from being exploited, like really, truly, fully exploited by the Penta, is to follow your strategy and authority. The Penta might not be for you if you understand your design. You look at the power column within your chart. Have a look and see how many activations you have there. If you have a lot of activations, then you're a Penta form. You're a Penta type. You function well in the Penta. You're not going to be lost. But if you have no activations or only one or two, or you get lost in the group, you're not able to be utilized by the Penta as such. Notice it's nothing against anyone else. It's not that other people were pushing you out. It's not an individual thing. It's nothing to take personally. See, this is the thing to understand as we go into this shift and this background frequency change, as we come into an age that for the human being is deeply, deeply individual. I said many years ago, before I even came across human design, we're coming into the age of the individual. I knew it. I just knew it. Maybe that's because I'm a projector. Projectors recognize these things. It's going to be very different. It's not going to be the same. Life is going to change for all of us. The structures that we have depended upon for millennia are going to fall away. They're not going to fall away overnight. It won't happen like that. But you see, if you're not following your strategy and authority, you're already behind the eight ball. It takes 7 years to decondition yourself. It takes 7 years to truly become your own authority, to truly be able to follow your strategy without having to think about it, because you see, thinking is the mind, and the mind will not follow your strategy and authority. Having your mind become your ally takes many, many years of deconditioning, and that's the only way forward. So you've got to ask yourself, what is it going to be like when I look outside of myself for assistance, for help, whether it be a doctor or a police officer or the government to sort out the potholes in the road. All of that's going away. That has been in place because of the background frequency has supported that. Well, that support's not going to be there anymore. There will still be many of us that will try and make that happen. There will still be many of us that are functioning under the propaganda of seven-centered beings, again, trying to work under a hierarchy. That is going away. The sleeping phoenix, the cross of the sleeping phoenix is not about the bargain. It is not about giving away your authority. It's about knowing your authority, applying it, and doing what you need to do for you. You see, it doesn't matter about anything that I say about what's coming. Excuse me, even though there's this coming cosmic shift, and we can allude to what that's going to look like. And what some have said and what Ra has said is, we're going to see a rise in autism. We're going to see a rise in infertility. We're going to see population decline for human beings. It's just part of what's happening because the background frequency is not supportive of Homo sapien intransitus. It can be if you follow your strategy and authority. But it is not supportive of the seven-centered being. And if you're still under the seven-centered propaganda, well, time after 2027 could become very, very difficult for you. Following your strategy and authority, the only way in order to know that is to have a reading done. Have a reading from someone that knows and can connect and can transmit this information. You see, even though we're coming into the age of the individual, if you don't know how and what it means to be for you to be an individual as yourself, I mean, if you don't know this knowledge, how do you be an individual? You're going to be you're going to try and still be an individual according to others. You're still going to be measuring that off others. And you'll just get stuck in the mire once again. It's illusion that we live in. The crystals of consciousness, as I mentioned before, coming to understand, not like the seven-centered being that was looking to this one consciousness outside of them, God, the very thing that placed them where they are. That is not there for us as nine-centered beings. The authority is within. And it's interesting, that one. That's what Christ said. The kingdom of God is within you. Maybe one that was preparing the way from many, we're talking 1,500 years beforehand, or even longer, 1,700 years beforehand, saying that the kingdom of God is in you. I mean, that's how long we actually need to warm up to that whole idea. The kingdom of God is in you. Because, when you think about it being 90,000 years as seven-centered beings, we are still trying to get over the hangover of being a seven-centered being. We're still trying to get over the hangover of hierarchies. And let's face it, there is no end to hierarchies. Not when the mind is in control. We're still functioning in a world where the mind is in control. And while the mind is in control, we will never have our own authority. We will never be able to follow our strategy. But it is imperative with the change that is coming. I can go deeper and deeper into what that's going to look like. Yes, there's going to be the conscious Penta, which, really, we've still got to have the Rave babies born first. So the conscious Penta isn't really going to come into its own until, 10, 15, 20 years down the track. It'll probably happen in an institution because these Rave babies will be deeply, deeply troubling to human beings. They will be extremely what appears to be autistic. And so in many cultures, they'll be euthanized. They won't even get to live. But in the West, they'll probably be put in institutions. And so the first Penta, the first conscious Penta will probably form in a psychiatric ward or some kind of care facility. That's the way it's going to probably happen, most likely. But for us, we're still human. You see, human design is for humans. But it points to everything about the rave. It points to the circuitry that has taken place in us, the shift that took place in us in 1781, one mutation that took place in order to prepare us over 250 years to then be able to give birth to a rave, which is a nine-centered being, and then their shift of the solar plexus center into a pure awareness center, No longer will the motor of the emotions be there for the rave. Now, we're still hanging around. Us Homo sapien and transitors are still here. And just as Homo sapiens were cohabitating with Neanderthal, we will also be cohabitating with raves, but we will have little to do with them because they function in their potential under the Penta, a form that has no form. That has no physicality. It uses the physicalities of the beings in which it gets its circuitry from. I mean, this is stranger than strange, right? It's stranger than fiction. Again, I come back to one simple thing. Follow your strategy and authority. If you have not had your human design reading done before, or if you do not understand it, well, reach out to me because I've had many people say to me that my human design readings are the best I've come across. Oh, that's nothing to do with me. That's to do with my human design. I'm a projector. I'm a 6/3 profile. I also have the alpha channel, so I'm particularly good. If I've been recognized for my leadership, I can lead. I also have the channel of surrender, channel of the transmitter. I'm able to transmit this information very, very effectively. In fact, I've done enough readings now where people have already had readings before, but then have said to me, wow, you actually made sense of all of this for me. So even though this is called the coming cosmic shift, notice I'm not talking too much about what that's going to look like. I covered as much as I needed to. But the point here is, if you're not following your strategy and authority by 2027, when that background frequency changes, you're not prepared. You're not. If you're waiting for the government to come and save you, they won't, because it will be falling away, especially once that shift will happen. And the change that we're going to see from that shift is going to take time. These structures aren't just going to fall away like that, but they will fall away. They will crumble slowly before our eyes, which means more and more of the authority is going to be on you. More and more of the onus will be on you. More and more of the responsibility of how you're going to live your life will be on you. That's what this is all about. Human design is for us as humans. It was given to us so that we could survive, not just survive, so that we can thrive in the coming age. Ra spoke about the coming shift and just how drastic that shift is going to change the way we live as humans. He never got a chance to see that. I know he did say he would have been interested to see what that looks like. He never claimed to say what it would exactly look like. He could only allude to it by looking at the very structure of what the Rave mandala showed him, of the human design body graph taught him. It's an incredible knowledge, but it's a knowledge that's not for everyone. Not everyone is here to awaken. Not everyone is here to awaken. But for those that are feeling that shift, for those that can see and feel the structures are falling away, and you can see it, you can. You can see those structures falling apart, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. And if you want to be prepared, follow your strategy and authority. Get into it now. You're going to have 2 years, 2 years of getting practice into that under your belt. And hopefully by the time that shift takes place, you've got a good rhythm of what it means to follow your strategy and authority, to live as yourself, to live out the potential of who you are. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I didn't go too deep into the specifics of this, but I find that it can get a little bit heavy for some people. And even then, talking about these trans-auric forms, pentas, wow, just look into it for yourself. Next time you're in a group, just feel, notice, understand, have awareness around how that group is functioning, and you'll begin to see, I see it all the time, that there is an entity controlling that group more than anyone else's. Find out for yourself. Get yourself a human design reading. The link will be in the description where you can get in contact with me. I do readings at a very, very good price. You will have a report done for you, plus a 90-minute reading with the replay and your Rave I Ching and chart as well. It's great value for what you get. But until next time, bye for now.